good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us as the first panel this afternoon. So the topic here is about restaking revolution, boosting security. So I think we'll just do a quick round of introduction. So my name is Julian. So I'm a core contributor to Bedrock. So we focus on bringing liquid restaked assets. First started with EigenLayer, and now we're working on Babylon as well. So what we believe in is that this is a brand new sustainable yield in a very crypto native way, and having that asset to work in various DeFi use cases is gonna really make some of the real use cases in DeFi, and that's what we're excited about. Okay, so maybe we can start with Josie.
Yep, thank you. Hi guys, Josie here. I'm one of the co-founders of Milky Way. So we started off doing liquid staking for Celestia's TIA token last year, and then afterwards we looked into the landscape, decided that we didn't want to be the fourth company out there that's doing liquid staking for all the Cosmos Layer 1 chains. And so we did a lot of DD and talked to a lot of the upcoming projects building using Cosmos SDK, realized that a lot of them actually need crypto economic security. And that's why we're currently building the first restaking platform in the modular ecosystem.
Cool. Hey, I'm Tarun. First off, sorry for delaying us a little bit. But I run a company called Gauntlet. We do a lot of risk analysis and risk work, and probably why I'm on this panel is I've written a lot of papers and blog posts on risks and restaking.
Hi, I'm Xing Shu, Chief Strategy Officer at Babylon. Babylon is a two-sided marketplace for shared security. It brings Bitcoins to be staked, and on the other hand, it secures other consumer chains, the broader proof-of-stake chain ecosystem, as well as rollups.
Hi, I'm Robert Drost. I am Executive Director and CEO at EigenLayers Foundation. And I think it's a restaking platform for Ethereum and as well as other protocol tokens that are using the core construct of Ethereum, which is a security pool as well as a decentralized validator pool that can be pointed towards any peer-to-peer protocol.
Yeah, so maybe I just want to start with some of the basics, right? So if you guys can share a bit of, how would you explain restaking to everyone? Because there was staking and now this is restaking, and who is actually providing assets for restaking and what's their expectations? Shall we go with Robert?
Oh, okay, we can go the reverse direction. I think that I'll tell you our version because I think there's other versions that are maybe a little more DeFi oriented. But our version and what inspired Sriram and the team, and I only joined the foundation in the past 12 months, but I knew the team from the beginning because I was helping an investor in the pre-seed round back then. So the original idea was that there's a very big problem with trustless security in the crypto space, and that's that it's very expensive compared to the reputational trust that happens in Web 2 and in conventional corporations. So it's great to have this absolutely strict, asset backing every transaction. But from an information theoretic perspective, you can actually construct, reasonable security models around utilizing stake that already has one slashing condition on it and adding additional serial slashing conditions that allow the cost of those additional staking levels to be very much reduced compared. So, instead of, there's projections, but if you have a huge amount of people that are sharing the stake, then it's possible to have, significant order magnitude type plus improvements on the cost of security. And from imputed demand, that means from our point of view, it's, we're trying to build something that's a middleware platform that enables people to very, very quickly stand up new services because they don't need to build their own security pool to start. They can do that later. And then they also don't need to build up decentralized validator pools. They just publish node software, and then the validator pools connect them to DPIN and other infrastructure. So kind of the financial layer of decentralized clouds. So basically, building up blockchain platform as a service, blockchain SaaS platforms, and then eventually a migration path for any Web 2 software company out there to move into a blockchain infrastructure cloud.
So in the context of Babylon, usually we talk about staking first, and then on top of that, we talk about restaking, right? So restaking means you stake something again. Usually it means you stake something that's already staked. In the context of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a proof of work chain that does not natively have the concept of staking. Proof of stake chains brought in this concept, has been working relatively well, right? Not theoretically, but in practice. Then Babylon brings in this staking utility into Bitcoin. So that's the first layer. We call it Bitcoin staking. And then there are different projects who might develop on top of that, right? For staked Bitcoins, you can do something, we call it liquid stake tokens. You can stake this representation of staked Bitcoin, whether it's liquid or not liquid. You can somehow stake that again and enable other security use cases. Sometimes we call them restaking.
Yeah, so I think maybe zooming out, I think there's the eigenlayer version of the world using Ethereum's validators. There's sort of the Babylon version of the world where you have remote consumer chains that you're posting sort of timestamps and acknowledgements in a way that you're able to synchronize the two chains. But most plainly, in my mind, the best way to think about restaking is it's sort of a marketplace between node operators that are globally distributed who happen to already be participating in a decentralized network and services who want to rent the capabilities of those operators to do extra work while being able to enforce covenants on them. Those covenants are enforced by the layer one, the decentralized network that they're already operating on. But realistically, it brings a marketplace for people who are already participating, already running nodes, already running infrastructure, to be able to provide additional services while also being able to enforce covenants and SLAs in a way that you wouldn't be able to do necessarily on your own without the blockchain coordinating it.
Yep, completely agree with what they all said, and exactly like it is a marketplace, and for us, we're not trying to reinvent the whole concept of restaking. It's really to extend the capability, because previously proof of stake chain, it's only very limited to securing layer one chains, and so we help it secure any other stuff, so be it rollups or other middlewares, right? Turin mentioned that it is a marketplace, and we're also really vamping on the UX element to let users really understand what are they securing. So for them, like they should be able to choose, I want to secure this rollup, I want to secure a bridge, or I don't want to secure a bridge because I'm scared of previous hacks, or I want to secure this project because I believe in the founder. So we're putting the option of who they can secure and then the risks of the capital that they input for delegation, we're putting this back in the user's hands so they will be able to choose on the UI. And also from the AVSs or the projects that we partner with, we also let them choose in terms of the assets they want to secure it by. And so it's a lot more flexible marketplace format, basically.
Yeah, cool. So I was reminded by the event organizer that at the end of this panel, so we're gonna choose one of the panelists to eat some of the chilies. If he's the least spicy one in terms of answering questions, right? So I'm gonna heat up the conversation a little bit. So just now, we talked about
This is slashing condition?
pretty much,
Like-
yeah. And we have all the audience as the validators to vote for that. Yeah, so just now, we talked about restaking as bringing, economic security power, but also more, like professional validation, all the stuff to the whole blockchain space. So the question here is about, so do we need multiple assets for restaking, or actually there will be like one asset that should be, perfect for restaking, right? Or to even take it to extreme, should USDC as an asset for restaking? Yeah, curious to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so I will say that it for me comes back to kind of the economic envelope that you're building within. So we have envelopes based on a couple different L1s. When you leave an L1 and you go to another L1, you start introducing a second security domain. There are ways to kind of mitigate that risk, but if you look at the risk of double spend in others, they're usually very limited for endogenous transactions, because whether you do a revert or not endogenously, you're just undoing a transaction, but no assets are stolen. But when you go across a bridge, that's the time, or even worse, if you do an on-ramp or off-ramp to crypto, very susceptible to risk from those types of things. So I think there's a natural effect that, whether it's Bitcoin, Babylon staking, Ethereum staking, Cosmos staking, other chains, I think there's an ecosystem that should be built for restaking around each of those to make it very efficient in their marketplaces. I should just say, I'm a lifetime supporter of the non-winner takes all market. I think a big power of crypto is that many people end up doing well. And so, I think it's very healthy to actually have dedicated people in each environment.
Babylon focuses on staking of the biggest asset, Bitcoin. But from my perspective, it's free market. If people like Bitcoin, they will stake Bitcoin. If people like some other coin, I don't know what, like USDC or whatever, there should be a market for that. We should be able to allow people to create a staking or restaking market for that, right? Then the natural adoption will determine whether there will be any use case or applications for this particular asset to be staked. But I think we need the tools and, materials to help people understand the risks associated with that, I think Gauntlet will be good at producing some of the analytics on the risks associated with certain tokens. If it's USDC, what that means, or maybe there's some counterparty risk. Maybe they can censor certain people. If it's WBTC, there was some recent controversial discussion on who controls, the underlying asset, right? So I think people need to understand these things before they decide whether they are very comfortable accepting security from staking or restaking of these particular assets.
Yeah, I'll shill Babylon a little bit because I really like that team there. And really introducing non-pooled security. So individually, people have trustless individual security. Massive innovation. And I don't know if people in Bitcoin recognize it as much, that they now actually have been brought in a very trustless, secure way to the other parts of crypto. So very, happy you guys have been doing that.
Thank you so much.
Robert, that might be 1 point minus. You might get that.
I was just thinking about
just to
that.
let you know. Just to let you know. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I'll say one thing, which is certainly within the layer ones, where the slashing covenants can be stacked in a way that's verifiable. It makes sense to have separate ecosystems. I think when it comes to having tokens that are slashable, you have to take a lot of time to analyze the different risks that occur, kind of like mentioned. For instance, if if you have a governance token for an AVS, like let's suppose you have a service like an AVS that has its own consensus protocol for some particular action. So the operators that participate in that service, infrequently they have to come to consensus about some extra operation. And in the process, imagine that governance token was used for that consensus, but also was restaked. You now have a bit of a principal agent problem because the operators who are using this asset for doing their external sort of like second layer consensus may have a lot of reason to collude to not slash themselves. And so you actually have to start thinking a little bit about where extra collusion might exist when you have certain assets that are not very liquid, are not very well distributed, or have a very high inflation rate versus the base asset. The other thing that's quite important is the base asset slashing rules are much easier to enforce, right? There's a very natural way in which I can wrap the slashing rules of Ethereum, like the rules for, say, an inactivity leak, for not voting on time, for not doing things, in a contract that ensures that the AVS slashes can be enforced first before the Ethereum slashes. On the other hand, a token contract, especially if it's a token contract that has some remote covenants, like it's a wrapped asset across a bridge, suddenly you may not be able to actually enforce the ordering between those two. And so, something like Babylon is built to be a protocol where there is a fixed ordering between two remote chains, but a random ERC20 or an SPL token, that might not be true. And so being very cognizant of those types of things, I think is actually extremely important. There's a whole litany of other risks, like MEV risk for non-base token might actually be quite a bit higher. if the slash event causes liquidity in the pool to disappear also. So there's a lot of other things to actually go through, but I would say there's no free lunch, right? Just remember that.
Just to your point, actually, because we run liquid stake tokens for both Eigenlayer and Babylon, actually we recognize that these two protocols are not relying on any oracles at all. Yeah, which would give us a lot of security assurance.
So I have a very not spicy take on this because I'm with Robert. Like, I don't believe in winners take all market. So how we design the protocol, it's not just coming from us, thinking that we want to be friends with all the other protocols and we're here to grow the pie together. It's actually also us speaking with a lot of the projects that we're partnering with. So a lot of them actually do want a multi-asset approach. And when I say multi-asset, it's actually selfishly from them their own token, because obviously they rent cryptoeconomic security because their own token isn't worth billions of dollars, but all of them have the goal of kicking out the rented security and then being secured by their own token. So they do want a combination of some sort of multi-asset approach, and everyone's risk appetite is different, right? Some like Ether, some like Bitcoin, and a lot would be like, when, God forbid, something happens, switch everything to stablecoin. And so we do have that approach for basically projects to choose. It can be very programmable too. It's like if BTC goes up by 50% in 24 hours, then it's 100% secured by BTC. So that's why we're also speaking with Eigen and Babylon on the integration to have their assets secure our projects as well. So that's a very not spicy take on our side.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, even Eigenlayer is going permissionless and multi-assets, right? So UniBTC is actually the only Bitcoin LST that can be restaked on Eigenlayer right now. So we're very excited about this opportunity to do that. And also recently, actually, Gauntlet has approved the proposal that UniBTC can be listed on Compound. So actually, we're starting to see a lot of things moving towards multi-assets, and people get to choose what they really believe in, right? So maybe just to touch a bit more about what assets can be used for restaking, right? So from some of the layer ones, they position themselves as a monolith layer one, right? So meaning that, okay, actually I can house all the dApps just on myself. I can be fast enough, I can be cheap enough. So for those chains, do you think they will need a restaking? Or actually, they will just say, okay, just come on, we can do that. You can feel free to, yeah.
Well, I mean, in Solana, you already have 2 restaking networks, right? So it's clear that there is demand for it. I think the interesting thing that you see between the different chains is their particular chain properties seem to really dictate what the choices of AVSs or networks look like. Like in Ethereum, there's certainly a lot of AVSs and networks sort of focused on pre-confs, base rollup related stuff and MEV, whereas I think in Solana a lot of the well, there's not that many so far, but of the 4 there are, the services seem to be much more focused on automation and tooling and way less about improving sort of Ethereum UX or improving enhanced yield on Ethereum. So I think what you'll end up having is network-specific ecosystems and services, which is also why I don't think there's going to be some one restaking network that works across everything. Solana and Ethereum are just going to have very different ecosystems of services. And because of that, I think there's just going to be very different yield profiles also from an investment standpoint. It might be funny, but also true that maybe Ethereum's restaking networks actually generate higher yield because, it's effectively a way of flowing through revenue from rollups or MEV back to Ethereum stakers. Whereas in Solana, you don't really need to actually flow that revenue back through because there's already vehicles for doing that more easily. So I think what'll be cool is once these things are live to actually see which, the financial properties also, I bet you they're going to be very different between networks, between Babylon, between the Solana ecosystem, and between Ethereum.
Yeah, I'll add. I think an important point about this issue of protocols using native tokens or basically renting security from some other asset pool, it's a really important point because I think there's like a tension between two kind of goals. Like one of them definitely is you want to have rewards within your own token system, and that drives towards using your own token system, and that's totally fine. Like we kind of accelerated EigenLayer. It's always been published since the protocol started that there was going to be multi-token support, and we, basically moved it up a lot because I think the space, once the DeFi kind of staking capital became very large, I think there was it validated the field and it allowed a lot more people to start building it, which is great. And so, but here's the tension. Let me actually just lay it out. The tension is that if you have a viable amount of security, which a lot of protocols don't have in the very beginning, to secure what you're doing, then that's great. You can always use your own token. If you don't, then it's another cost like anything else to basically get the assets that you need in terms of, you previously couldn't compete with like a big Oracle platform because they just had the most possible security around their thing. And now it is actually possible, and a lot of people are building very secure oracles, in some ways a lot more decentralized than like the leading players. But if I kind of draw back to the Amazon model, because I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with that, if you run all of your infrastructure on Amazon, you're wasting a lot of money because the margins and the overhead cost is somewhere between 2 to 10x by running infrastructure there. It's very convenient. So the hybrid model that's the most cost efficient in there, and I'm going to say this as well in security space, is that whatever kind of base level security that you can kind of get, in this case endogenously, that's great, do that. It helps to drive your DAO, it helps to drive your own token economics and so forth. But you often do have to have the ability to burst. And just like in Amazon, burst up to higher capacities. You're going to need this for a period of time. Right now, the resolution is pretty big, but over time, I think the time intervals become quite tight. And from a very important marketing perspective, you're paying for the security, which is risk reducing, but then that actually allows more business volume to drive to your protocol because you are safe. And so that's kind of the trade-off. So you cost optimize. You would really not want to do only one or the other. That flexibility is the best part.
I think a few points were touched upon. A few different aspects of this question, right? So we think about L1, whether they will adopt staking or restaking. It could mean that this L1 can be secured by some other protocol using Bitcoin or Ethereum, as a staking asset. It could also mean that this L1, or whether this L1 will think about having their own L2s, which will be secured by staking or restaking of the asset of the native token of this L1, right? So I think it's all different considerations. So when we speak to different chains about the first category, we are always very careful. Let's say for a particular chain that's already up and running for years, getting more security from Bitcoin is not about becoming a Bitcoin L2 necessarily, right? Some of the chains want to become a Bitcoin L2, some of them don't want. But I think these two do not have any direct causal relationship. It could be your L1, and you can still get Bitcoin security while still being your L1. Right? It's just about enhanced security, especially if you have a lot of assets on your chain, and you need more economic security, right?
So we're a little bit different in the sense that we actually don't support securing layer ones, because there are a lot of options out there for Cosmos layer ones already, apart from bootstrapping their own chain. But they can also use Babylon, they can use Cosmos Hub's shared security, or they can use mesh security. So we were like, okay, we're not doing that. And so what we're actually working on in terms of securing is actually a lot of the Cosmos chains right now, they use Cosmos SDK for the flexibility. So Hyperliquid, DYDX, they're Cosmos chains. Story Protocol, they're also a Cosmos layer one. And then they do tokenized IP, right? So they need some verification and crypto economic security to make sure that the tokenization is done properly. I can't just be like, iPhone is Josie's IP. Then whoever did that needs to be slashed, right? So obviously Story Protocol is doing it themselves, but there are a lot of other smaller projects out there that do all of these DeepIn AI or RWA on Cosmos SDK. So those are the ones that we're working with to help them in terms of the security. So a little bit different on the layer one side of things.
Yeah. So this year is definitely the year for restaking. We have seen billions of dollars and millions of users come into this. Of course, everyone is excited about the opportunity of getting additional yield, which actually could be sustainable. So let's maybe look at a bit more on the demand side, right? So who are the ones that are going to pay for the shared security? Yeah, could you share some of the use cases that you think are very promising in terms of using shared security, or it's just a natural fit? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have, most of my career background has been in infrastructure, Web2 infrastructure, hardware, software, all the way up to application layer. So I've kind of seen a lot of transitions and a lot of growth in that space. I'm not sure how many people in the audience are kind of aware, but like the global public cloud market is passing 400 billion, approaching $500 billion a year of spend. And that's not like we think about in crypto where that's like, you talk about, oh, wow, $1 trillion of volume. Like this is people paying someone else, fully with that money that goes into their revenue. So it's a lot more significant, and it's new money flowing into the crypto space for people who are, providing around this. And if you look at the overall enterprise market, I have to look at like what it is more recently, but I know a while back it was already passing 1.5 trillion. Consumer markets another 1.5 trillion. So like that's when you're asking about like where, like how does this expand? Like this restaking and some of this becoming capital efficient, and then also building a model for outside companies to start transitioning the general IT software space into crypto is a massive unlock. I think the other big one that everybody focuses on the DeFi side is just basically real world assets and doing the Airbnb of liquefying illiquid things. But it's quite unique for this transition to happen. And it's kind of good in the restaking mentality wherever you're building in Cosmos or Ethereum or whatever, because it's not like a flag day where you have to switch and developers have to pick up a completely new API and a new language and a new this and a new that. There will be development of frameworks and other things that make it very easy for current software developers to just deploy in blockchain while they're still deploying in Web2. And then there'll be transitions where people who are still building on one or two of the public cloud markets, Web2 style, start transitioning some parts of their infrastructure over piecemeal into Web3. So I think it's the beginning of like a pretty exciting time for crypto in general, enabled by this transition to capital efficient. Anytime you drop the cost of something, we always see this in economics, it creates a massive unlock in imputed demand, because things that previously were just not possible become possible. So that's, at least in me, the inspiring part of why I just liked and had gone into this space pretty early.
So at Babylon, we focus on chains. It's pretty straightforward, pretty focused. But chains can be very different, right? We are agnostic to what kind of applications they run on their chains, but we just want to secure their chains. And it is my belief that eventually every single crypto project will want to launch a chain. I think it's controversial, but I think I've seen so many projects. Eventually, they will launch a chain. So that's what we try to, focus on.
I mean, I think the thing, in 2021 or sort of whenever Sriram first told me about this idea, the thing that I thought was most interesting was from 2020 to 2021, we saw a huge proliferation of off-chain infrastructure that was necessary to maintain the state of existing blockchains that were effectively autonomous before. So everything from having to have MEV auctions, having to have relays, having to have sequencers for rollups, having to have, kind of bridge operators, these kind of like off-chain actors that somehow were coordinating a lot of different components, but the value that was going through them was somehow invisible to the on-chain data and on-chain analytics. And so there's sort of some sense in which there's no incentive for that revenue or that information to ever make it on-chain. But restaking was sort of a natural way that if you use that to enforce penalties against, say, a malicious sequencer or a malicious malicious proposer in an MEV auction, that you actually could make that transparent again. And I think that's still fundamentally, to me, where there are actually billions of dollars going through all the off-chain infrastructure every month. And a lot of that will be much more transparent to the base chain, which can then change its economy thanks to restaking.
To me, what really excites me is obviously helping out with a lot of the Web3 primitives. So we're partnering with Rollup to decentralize their sequencers, oracles to help scale, like Robert mentioned, bridges, and DA provider actually. So for example, there's a company that's using Babylon to secure their chain and then using us to scale their light nodes for their DA provider. So it's really exciting to help all of these Web3 projects launch faster, saves their costs. But another thing that really excites me is on the Cosmos side, a lot of projects actually choose to build their own chain servicing Web 2 and got nothing to do with Web 3 apart from the technology, right? So you actually won't see these projects or these companies at conferences over here, but we do talk to them and they're really interested in using restaking as well because all of them, not all of them, a lot of them are tokenizing stuff, so like invoices or real estate, these sort of things. And then so they service completely traditional Web 2 companies or TradFi companies, and they don't even mention to their clients that it's actually blockchain technology that they use. And we partner with them, so it really it really excites me to see us helping in the real world adoption of our technology, and it's not even chilled out in that sense. Yeah.
I'm going to add on a little bit with that comment. Thank you for that. And I am going to try to not eat that chili, so I'm going to say something spicy. So I really don't want to, unless there's like milk or yogurt around. So I am going to say a little bit about, because you made the good comment about chains as like the main infrastructure. I think that we have a lot in blockchain gotten very focused on chains, as it should be, because blockchain was started out with Bitcoin and then more efficient Ethereum and then more open innovation compatible Cosmos and then more fast but like big centralization trade-off with other fast chains. But what I will say is that the idea of needing a chain, here's an example I will give because I think it's a very concrete example. Go back to 2017 and Filecoin is building a proof of space-time protocol, and they're building a storage network, and they're building the Filecoin virtual machine. Why are they building a Filecoin virtual machine? Well, at the time, they had to do that because there wasn't enough capacity in anywhere else in the market. A lot of that is kind of gone now. So you have layer 2s with like networks of layer 3s and a lot of chains and block space as a result, or app chains if you need them. But right now, if somebody was launching proof of space-time in a protocol like that, I would argue the right way to do that is build a peer-to-peer protocol where people make commitments with each other, infinite scaling, because P2P versus like global consensus on a chain does not have any limitations. It's like the ideal parallelization, and incredibly fast because you can commit to things on a peer-to-peer basis in a data center in a couple microseconds. And over larger places, across the US, the round trip latency times are 30, well, not round trips, like 50, 60, but one way is like 30. So, for in general, I think, the chains are always going to be important because they're a kitchen sink that accumulates a lot of apps and assets onto that. But literally, Babylon chain built a chain. This is where it's all getting spicy. We didn't build a chain. And the reason, we didn't build this goes back to, the kind of the counter you were saying correctly that Bitcoin is, and, possibly is forever the biggest asset in the crypto space. But it is not from my point of view, it has some constraints to it because it has a data rate of around a kilobyte per second. And, on Ethereum, you're getting into 150, 200 kilobytes per second. EigenLayer, we have a long roadmap, but we just launched way more DA than you need at 15 megabytes per second. And unlike other chains, we're not building, an L1 chain to do any of these things. We're building the services as peer-to-peer networks, and then we're anchoring it to a chain. And I think that's going to become, for crypto to scale out and grab a lot more value, that's actually the scale-out phenomenon. From a DApp layer, like an end consumer-facing company of any kind, everything that they use is some fuzzy cloud of infrastructure, software infrastructure, hardware infrastructure, financial security infrastructure, payment rails infrastructure. So you have to think about it like, we all in blockchain space, for better or worse, whether you're doing chains or other constructs, are building infrastructure. And, we're all building layers of what looks like the software stack to the end, B2C facing companies. And so it's really important. The chain is like the anchoring middleware that combines everything. But there's going to be, like Tarun is mentioning, a few of these off-chain things. There's going to be layers and layers of, like, you go look at Google and Amazon and others, and that's just a starting point of tens of thousands of infrastructure software. And, with restaking, I think different platforms will target it different ways. But EigenLayer, if you look back at the original stuff, and we've still continued it, the idea was to put all of that middleware on a very efficient shared security framework so that we don't have fracturing and sort of weakest link security that can break the whole thing, which is what we have and what prevents growth.
So from my perspective, restaking even happened during proof of work time. Dogecoin used the security of Litecoin, right? And there was a period everybody was trying to do merge mining, but the issue was that it's not programmable to prevent malicious actions. So you cannot do slash. So I think that's what restaking has brought onto the table to make it much more extendable. So there is a very clear use case in that sense.
Well, I was just going to add one thing there because I'm trying to really not eat the chili, so spicy, I'll say again. So I'll say, like, merge mining and other things were not restaking. Inherently there was no slashing on proof of work to start, and then merge mining was not making the base L1 aware of the merge mine chain in a lot of cases. And so I would say, like, you look at an asset that did not have any real slashing, and Babylon adding slashing to it is a fundamental unlock in a way that, like, a layer 2 network on Bitcoin is not. That's why I'm always like, Bitcoin is very valuable anywhere it is in DeFi. It doesn't have to be built directly in Bitcoin. And restaking has a fundamental aspect which has to happen for it to really have an economic unlock, which is to allow the asset to have information theoretically secure. Tarun works a lot on this, kind of spreading of reslashing risk across multiple places. So it's a good mental model, just get people to kind of realize it's there. But, like, technically, when you look under the hoods, it's not anything alike to merge mining.
Maybe last question. I wanted to direct this question to Tarun first. We talk a lot about restaking, and from a risk perspective, what are the challenges or risks that you think it's worth highlighting? And also, the other panelists, feel free to join that, or you could have some points for builders, to ask them to do in this space.
I mean, I think the one that is more top of mind for me, more because I've just wrote a paper about this, is sort of thinking about what's sort of the minimum incentive spend you need to avoid sort of cascading failures across AVSs, where, like, one AVS slashes some operators, those operators are shared with another AVS, and then it causes a cascade. The question is, what is the minimum amount you need to spend in rewards or fees such that you have the right amount of stake for avoiding that? And so I think fundamentally there's, now we're starting to actually get to a place where we have some theoretical frameworks, at least, for thinking about this. In practice, the biggest problems are going to be, once these networks are live, can you estimate the actual profits that you could get from corrupting the service? The second thing is, as you have DeFi interacting with these services, whether it's in liquid restaking tokens or whether it's in other forms, really carefully monitoring the liquidity of these assets, especially if rewards tokens are used to incentivize operators, ensuring that there's actually sufficient liquidity for those tokens. Otherwise, the value of security can go down dramatically. I think the other important thing to think about, and I think EigenLayer's new security update is a version of this, is how do you isolate stake to certain parts of the system versus allowing other parts to be shared, right? And I think this idea of being able to program how much stake needs to be uniquely attributable or slashable to one service or another is a way of giving a lot more flexibility to these different services. But at the end of the day, to kind of Robert's point earlier, the goal is to figure out the optimization problem of what is the minimum amount I have to spend in order to get the minimum amount of security I need to service the transaction volume I want, right? And I think as these networks go live, you will have a lot better understanding of the capital structure and stack for modeling that. And yeah, so I think in general, A, the cascade risks, B, the liquidity risks, and C, the concentration risks are kind of in that order. It's the ones you should be thinking about.
Really great points, Tarun. Just you said one phrase in there, transaction volume, and I just don't want people to take away that means like TPS or whatever.
Sorry. Yes. I meant like net demand, that is fees paid to operators.
Yeah.
I think I would just add cybersecurity risks. You know, the more Legos we have, the more attack surface we have. You know, like people now kind of assume that's fine, but it's only fine until it's not, right? So I'm still very worried about some bugs hidden somewhere, although we have gone through 3 secret audits, right?
Yeah, I agree with what they said, but some people might hate me for saying this. Like, for liquid staking and restaking, unfortunately, a lot of people measure our success purely based on the TVL. And then a lot of them from like, be it builders or whatever, they're like, so what's your TVL? What do you want your TVL to be? I'm like, but that's not the point of why we're building restaking. But a lot of them somehow seem to focus on that. And then exactly, like, I think it's the over focus on the TVL that, brings about all that potential cascading risks that the others mentioned.
Yeah, that's a great point. I will actually say, like, Shriram and team were building restaking since 2021. And for 2 years, I mean, literally some people who are now the biggest bulls in the restaking market for like 2 years were basically saying doesn't make sense, won't work, bad idea, it's never going to have value and everything else. And, the aspect of TVL is like what convinced people not reading papers and not doing that hard work. So, that is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with you. So I got some signal that we got our time's up. So thank you so much for staying with us.
Who's eating the chili?
I'm gonna volunteer to take that.
Wow.
Unless somebody else wants to.
No
share
objection.
with me. Okay. Yeah.
Is this like self/?
Because I think we could have continued this like for hours, right? This is such an insightful discussion. Yeah, it's actually a reward for me.
I mean,
so.
honestly, yeah, I'm gonna eat pepper.